So welcome, Amanda Malko, to On Influence and Impact.
It's great to be here.
So you are a phenomenal go-to-market leader. You're an expert in driving clarity and alignment across high-growth organizations. You're a three-time CMO, and you're currently the CMO and CRO of Thinkific.
Yes, I am honored to be the CRO at Thinkific. We're a platform that helps experts and businesses sell and monetize their content and courses. And we've got a lot of great customers, and I'm fortunate to also work with Amanda.
There's this common leadership myth that kindness and results cannot coexist. And today, I'm excited to debunk that myth with you. And through our work together and what I've observed in your leadership, I deeply believe that the very best leaders embrace empathy and excellence together. I'm excited to dive into your story and how you've come to believe that too, and how to bring that to life. So let's start early on. I'm curious, was there a moment in your career where you felt like you had to choose whether to be the nice one or the tough one? What was that like for you?
This has been many moments throughout my career. I still regularly feel this polarity between leading with kindness and empathy and also having a really high bar for excellence and for performance. Both of those things have been true throughout my career. I think the thing that makes it feel like a duality often does come from a place that's gendered. As women, a big journey for me has been separating out what maybe is imposed on me versus what I truly believe to be true. I do believe that empathy and ambition go very well together. I remember a leader who I trusted and admired so much, and he pulled me aside one day and said, I think you're being too nice in some regards. When I asked him to unpack that, he gave me a few examples. I think in many ways he was right. And I did need to find a way to balance what I wanted in the way that I showed up with my team members, my peers, and my ambition. As I've gotten more self-aware, it's interesting that continues to show up as a narrative. I see it not just with myself, but with other women on my team. I think there's this dance we do as women to show up authentically and with empathy, but also own our ambition and our bar for excellence at the same time, and challenge when people maybe have misaligned assumptions around those two things going together.
Why do you think that misaligned expectations, why do you think that even exists? This belief that you can't be kind and compassionate and empathetic along with people-oriented versus results-driven. Why does that dichotomy even exist?
It's a good question. It's very hard to be vulnerable and empathetic and deeply care and also be authentic. I'm championing performance. I have a high bar for excellence, and we can be kind and also deliver results. It's almost like this sort of polarity of growth versus efficiency that so many software and B2B companies are struggling with right now. If you pick one, that's fairly easy. Anybody can do that. When you're trying to be two things at the same time, high growth and efficient, empathetic and ambitious, and drive excellence, it's not 2 times harder. It's like infinitely harder. Yeah. I think the first reason it comes up as I've reflected on it over my 20+ year career is I think it's actually comes from a place of either fear that it can't be true, and in some cases, a little bit of laziness. Not everybody has this, but I've definitely observed people who push it. I'm like, it's not that you can't get there. It's just that you're not convinced that the extra effort is worth it. Usually that's a place where I coach from. I'm here to tell you it is worth it, and it's time to step it up and lead with empathy and also drive performance. I think the second reason is there is a misunderstanding around what it means to be empathetic and kind. It's gotten a bad rap, right? Like kind means being a pushover or putting people's comfort over company performance. For me, it means none of those things. It means coming from a place of understanding the person first and making sure that you're leading in a way that aligns their strengths, gaps, and interests with what the company and the business needs. And to me, that's leading with empathy. It is not about being a pushover, over indexing on people's personal lives or any of those things. I think that's the 2 reasons that I see where authorities come up.
It's hard, to your point, it's just so challenging to embody both of those at the same time, the same moment. They feel like they contradict one another. I even experience it within myself. But to your point, with practice, it feels like we can get there. Can I ask, like you mentioned the idea of gender earlier on. Is this exclusively for women, or do you feel like men also struggle with this?
I definitely think men struggle with this. I think sometimes it shows up differently. They're dealing with different assumptions around the way that they need to show up and lead. Sometimes I see men hold back from showing kindness and empathy because of different expectations that are placed on them. Frankly, I see women do that too. I think it's a cultural thing, and that comes around the word kindness and the idea of empathy. And I think it's more acute than ever, maybe, this pushback around DE and I that so many
Yes.
people are having. And when you peel back the layers, it's like, how are we defining that? And I think a lot of it just feels misappropriated. I'm not sure there's even alignment on outcomes or what the
Yes. I appreciate that perspective because what you're saying is that we are all shaped by our past, our experiences, and how we were raised. Perhaps there's some element for women where they're taught to be more pleasing. So it's more easy to lean on the kind side. And I'm very much criticizing this, but perhaps men are taught on a different perspective. So it's harder for them to integrate the kindness in addition to the directness and the results driven. So it's an interesting challenge for both genders, yet may show up in the same way.
Yes. And I think there's two sides to it. There's what we project onto ourselves because of our past or relationships we've had. And then there's truly what people place on us in the moment. And I'll give you an example. I was sitting for an interview for a C-level position at a software company many years ago. I was interviewing with another C-level who was someone who was going to be a peer. And he paused for a minute and I asked him the question, what do you think the organization needs in a leader in this role? And he paused for a minute and he looked at me and he said, and this is a lovely person, did not expect this response. What I see in you that I think we could really use is someone who could really help nurture our co-founders and bring out alignment in our co-founders and help us all get to a better place of collaboration. And I said, I think I'm here to drive revenue. That was the role I was interviewing for. And I'm just curious how you see that impacting this. And he almost said, because you're a woman, and he caught himself and he said, I just think your kind of style might help us drive better relationships among each other. And I looked at him and I said, I know we've only known each other briefly, but I just want you to know I'm not the right person for that job. And he asked me to explain, and I explained that I actually don't have a lot of patience for trying to be like brokering co-founder. It was clear the co-founders needed some help in their relationship. And if I'm going to be here, I need to know that I have their support and then I'm going to be able to do my job. I'm concerned that I'm not the right person for that job. And that feels like a different job. And I think when I left the interview, and I remember reflecting
How
on
empowering to name that and say it. I'm like, yes.
he was so taken aback. And I was like, yeah, but at the same time, they were either gendered in their view of me, which he certainly was, or they had this perception of a woman in this role was like the chief mom officer or something. Part of the challenge in leading with authenticity and ambition is sometimes it is on us to name it, to claim it, and to push back on it. It took me a long time to have the confidence to do that. There is a debt to not naming, claiming, and pushing back on it. I let that debt accrue for too long.
Name it, claim it, and push back on it. I like it. How do you bring this forward? A leader comes forward, like, how do I integrate this ambition and authenticity or kindness, people driven and results driven? What do leaders need to understand about integrating both of these and showing up?
The first thing is understanding why they're connected for you. As you think about how you want to show up as a leader, I've taken some time to really document and write out what is my leadership philosophy. I think it's really helpful because then when you're in a moment where you're feeling that tension, you can remind yourself why showing up with both of those things is helpful. For me, my why behind why I choose to lead with authenticity and empathy is because I believe it helps me better connect with my employees and team members, and better connecting with them helps me get to the heart of issues and help better coach people and drive performance in the organization. I didn't have that clarity of why earlier in my career. And as I've thought about this and really dialed my own leadership style, I draw on that in moments, including difficult ones, like when there is a performance-related exit. It is probably the why and the skill set that I draw on the most in those conversations, actually.
I think that's true in any scenario, right? Where if you get clear on your intentions or get clear on your why, that helps you stay focused and committed with anything that you set out to do. Why do you feel this is most needed now?
I think there's so many reasons why it's needed anytime, but I think we're living in a time where people feel less connected. I think the research shows people feel less connected than ever, both to each other
Yes.
and to companies. People are really truly disengaged from work in a way they haven't been in a long time. And so if you're, as a leader, leading a team, you can't lead a disengaged team effectively if you're not willing to roll up the sleeves and dig in and get to know them and empathize with what they're going through and build relationships. And if you're in a remote environment with a team that is more disengaged because they've been through or whatever the reasons, then it's going to be even harder because it's through a screen.
And I'll add one more to that too. I think we're in such an era of disruption, whether that be the political, the economic, the societal, the AI disruption. And when there is uncertainty, what gets unlocked in people is fear. So, in
Right.
order to mobilize people, you have to understand them.
Teams leading through fear almost never ends well, doesn't end up in a good place. Fear is not a good motivator of long-term performance.
So, you get clear on your why, that this is how you're going to lead. How has that shaped or shifted your leadership influence and impact?
I used to be really guarded to the point that I'm married, I have a child, and I don't even know that most people would have known any of those things without really prying. I was pretty guarded and I had this separation. And I think it was a shield because I'd been through a lot in my career, especially working in tech organizations where I was often the only woman in the room. It felt like a shield that was helpful. As I got more senior in my career, I realized it wasn't as helpful and wasn't really serving me. It actually prevented me, as I got more senior in my career, from engendering trust in the way that I wanted to, because I was unwilling to be vulnerable. It prevented me from having the kinds of relationships I wanted to have with my leadership teams.
Yeah.
I had to do a lot of work to break it down.
I see, if I can name it, some emotion showing up.
Yeah,
What is that?
I think it's so much nicer to show up in a workplace as your authentic self. It's refreshing, it's freeing. I see that a lot in women that I mentor or work with. There's like a shield there. It helps to see other women in leadership, but I also have a boss or a mentor who gives them permission to take the shield away for a minute and see what that feels like. I had some great coaching and mentorship at that time to get me there.
I think it's such a common journey. I remember my days at Twitter as an executive with all male counterparts, and all you do is guard up, right? You put the layers of armor on. I'm like, I got this. And then for me too, a woman named Jen Dolsky at change.org, she finally taught me I can be myself and I can drive ambition and I can be kind. Like, hot damn, what's possible?
I was really lucky that I got to see it both in a female that I worked with, but also I had two male mentors and bosses that were fantastic at this.
Sometimes there's this fear that kindness can lead to complacency or avoidance, lower expectations. How do you make sure that's not the case in your leadership?
I was actually just having a discussion with someone last week on this. They were struggling with a performance-related exit. And we went through all the reasons why it was the right thing for the individual, for the business. Most importantly, the business really needed some change here. And they were really struggling with it. And I said, let's take a step back. Why are you struggling with it? And they were like, I really care about this person. I've built these relationships because I care about people. And that's my why in my professional life. And I was like, and that's still true. And it's beautiful that you're leading with such empathy and kindness. It's okay to be sad about this. And I think it doesn't change that. Sometimes just accepting that if you're going to lead with empathy and vulnerability, sometimes it's sad and it's tough. It actually can be more difficult than if we just put our shields up and trudge forward and pretend there's no emotion. I think sometimes just acknowledging that it's okay to be sad about it. And you can give your personal self space to feel it. And then, okay, now we've done that. Let's go back to, why is this the right decision? And do you still feel that conviction? And the person still feels that conviction. So two things are true. You're sad about this and it's the right decision. Now, how are we going to have the conversation? The trick and the hard part is to feel the feelings and also lead with conviction around what's right for the business, for the performance outcomes you're trying to drive towards. Holding space to have both of those things is difficult. I've had wonderful performance exit conversations because I care deeply about the people. We can have a conversation that's difficult while me being able to show up and say, how can I help at the same time? Feel the feelings, don't put up the shield, and make sure that you go back to what's right for the business.
Beautiful. It's important to allow yourself to have the space to do that so you can act with greater intention of clarity of what you need to do. And you're being more human. In this age of AI where everything is getting replaced, what will be left is our humanity and our ability to connect. I love the way that you bring both of those together. Can you share, or has there been a moment or a breakthrough when you did show up in the way that you wanted, holding both of these, and we're like, wow, look at what we were able to achieve?
Yeah. I have had this happen a couple times where someone is going through a difficult moment in their personal life, and maybe that's showing up in workplace performance. I find these to be some of the more difficult times because high ambition expectations, what a company needs in terms of revenue outcomes and results, doesn't change because someone's going through a difficult time. And yet, as a leader, you do have to show up differently for that person and to get to an outcome. And the outcome maybe that person can't be in the role right now. I've had several experiences throughout my career where I needed to have the, can you do this right now? And let's work through what that looks like. I have gotten different outcomes from those conversations, but all of them productive ones for the business and also for the individual, which I am very proud of, because in many cases, these were life critical moments for these people. If I had just trudged forward with the business needs, I don't think the business would have gotten what they needed. Replacing great leaders is hard. And I don't think it would have been productive for them personally.
I can see how much you care with some of the emotion that comes up when you share these stories.
Yeah, I'm in touch with most of my leadership from even 15 plus years ago, people on my team. I build relationships for the long term.
How do I blend these two together? What are 2 or 3 things that I could do?
To be ambitious, you got to know where you want to go. You got to start with, what does the business need? How are we going to get there? Be very clear on ambitious but realistic goals is what I always say. Connecting with your why of why that matters is the big unlock. The second thing is, it push comes to shove, it's difficult conversations where the pendulum will swing too much to kindness or too much to directness, and where people struggle. Write down a narrative for how you're going to have the conversation and what a good outcome looks like, which could mean a lot of different things. It could mean I want to feel good at the end. It could mean I want them to know that I care. It could mean we just have to make a business decision. Writing out a narrative of where you're trying to get to can be helpful to practice this. For really difficult conversations, I usually advise people to, if they can, find a trusted partner, whether that's a boss or just a peer, even a spouse, to like role play with.
Or a coach.
Or a coach who's fabulous like Amanda. It is really helpful to do that. But I think a lot of people I've noticed, they're like, I'm just going to do it off the cuff. That doesn't usually go as well as you think it will.
I love it. So just to name it back to you, there's 2 strategies you're saying. The first of which is know your why. The why is both a business component. What's our goal? What are we aiming to achieve? What does success look like? And then what's my personal why in terms of how do I want to show up? What's important to me, not just in work, but in the bigger version of who I'm trying to be. And the second is where it hits some friction is often in these more challenging or perceived difficult conversations. How do you get clear on what success looks like for those and then practice?
Yeah. If I were to pick a third one, for anyone who may have conversations they regret, like I do, reflect on the moments that you wish you'd done differently and decide how you're going to be different in the go forward.
How do you practice and ready yourself for the moments that aren't yet here, but know will likely come based off of your past?
Or like conversations I would have had differently with the boss or whatever it is.
Love it. So I'm going to read a quote. When we were preparing for our conversation, you said, "For those who can't or won't meet your high bar, it is kind to part ways. It is also unkind to lower the bar because it's letting the company down, and those who thrive on excellence will find it a disappointment to their careers." Can you share a leadership moment that shaped that belief?
I worked at a company where we had an agency and we had two software companies, and we built it from really early days. We were about 80 employees and we built it to about 250 million and 1,300 employees. We spent a lot of time on our values, as cultural values, and the kind of performance we wanted to drive. In hindsight, I realized how exceptional our hiring and the people. And it was pretty clear as a result when people didn't meet the bar. I remember feeling like it was the highest performing team I had ever been a part of. And how would we scale it? By never lowering the bar. The way you do that is not just great hiring, but also being very clear early on when something's not working. I saw over the course of many years how transformational that was. And now, as someone who's been an advisor to many businesses, it does not take me long to go in and see when they left the bar down. It is very hard to move that bar back up. If you want a great talent dense company, you can't sacrifice the bar for excellence. If you do, it is a journey to get the bar back up.
Yes. Do you have a framework then for how to have that conversation? Because we all struggle with it.
When I see leaders struggle with this conversation, they haven't actually been clear on the bar. So whenever there's hesitation, I'm not sure. Are you sure they're the right fit? Is this the right, the outcomes aren't there? I think you got to start with, have I been clear on the bar? And I think even great leaders sometimes have not done the job.
Yeah. All the time in my practice too. +1 on that one.
So I think the first step is, let's get clear on the bar. What are the outcomes we're looking for? Sometimes speed is a component to that. I help a lot of people hire for leaders and I talk about good outcomes. One thing I always drill into is, what does speed mean to you? Oftentimes there's the output, but then it'll be like the quality wasn't there or they just moved too slow. So sometimes the expectation also includes those measures. One of the things when I'm interviewing is I'll say, tell me about a project that you did that was very fast. It seems like a tactical question, but I'm trying to get at what's their bar for excellence on speed. You can also do that with quality and how they define quality. And then of course you've got quantifiable outcomes, especially if you're in a revenue, like sales or marketing. Are the goals clear? Have you defined quality and speed in a way that supports the goals and aligns with what you want? And if you've done that and the person isn't meeting the bar, I'm not going to say it's an easy conversation because they're not easy, but it's easier because you said, I've been clear.
What's the miss?
What's the miss? And sometimes those might be coachable. That's a decision you can make. And sometimes they either may not be coachable or we don't have time to coach. Sometimes there are organizations that truly there's not time to coach.
Yeah, but you got to get clear on that.
But you have to get clear on that. Yep. I think the majority of the work in those conversations is around, have we been clear? Has the leader been clear on the outcomes? If the leader's been clear on the outcomes, the last 5% is easy. It's now there's a decision to make and how we communicate that decision or how we coach on that decision. But 95% of the work is, am I clear on what I'm expecting here?
I really appreciate that because it holds the leader to account too.
Yeah.
It's very much on the individual that you're having the conversation with, but you're just as responsible for it too.
I rarely see leaders struggle as much when they've been clear. You get in this middle area where I see leaders not push, but they also don't make the exit because they haven't been clear yet. Sometimes
the messy middle.
It's the messy middle. Those are the worst places to be for everybody. The person in that role knows something's off and they're not feeling great. So be clear on what the bar is and what performance expectations are. Time box it if you have to, but make sure that you're clear and there's a time period for a decision if you have to make one.
Beautiful. I love that clarity is kind. Any other advice that you have for leaders who struggle with or worry about being mean or hurting people's feelings or just the pain that sometimes leaders impose?
Yeah, I would say take care of yourself, because if you're going to do the work to truly be authentic and caring and also drive high performance, it will be messy and hard. And it would, if you lose sight of managing and working on your own emotions and taking your own time for yourself to process, you might find There's a faster road to burnout when you care deeply. So
Yeah,
just take care of yourselves.
beautiful.
And coaching helps.
So I'd like to do a little pivot if you're open to it. One thing that feels so clear to me throughout this conversation and through our work together is that you've got such a clear leadership voice now. You're rooted in your why. You know how you want to show up. Any advice, like how do you get there?
Put yourself in uncomfortable situations. Take on the job that feels too big. Ask for more if you want more. I think it's really hard to become who we want to become if we don't get out of where we are. A lot of times people jump to promotions. I've taken downward and lateral moves many times in my career. Ask for the promotion. But I think my biggest growth has actually come from taking on things that are ambitiously uncomfortable. And those oftentimes are not promotions at all. They're expanding the scope of what we're capable of. Sometimes that means taking a job that's a lateral move or a downward move or taking on something outside our scope in a current role without getting paid anymore, by the way. Be ambitious in your tolerance for discomfort, not knowing things, because that is where the growth is. I think a lot of people I see today earlier in their careers, they're asking for a promotion. But I think you first have to articulate what skill do you want to build? What career path do you want to build? What gaps do you have that you might want to solve for? And then if you're ready for a promotion, yes, go ask for the promotion, but just know that growth has many avenues.
I always ask this one question. What's one habit or best practice that you're like, do this one thing and it will really help or support? What is it?
Before every difficult conversation, physically write down what outcome you want from the conversation and how you want to have shown up.
One simple framework to add is I always do the think, feel, do. What do you want that person to think? What do you want them to feel? And what do you want them to do as a result?
Do that and use these things in your personal life. I use them in my personal life. Having holistic views of how you show up in life is helpful and not just like saying, oh, this is the thing that I do at work.
What kind of influence and impact are you hoping to bring into life this year?
I am hoping to have a lot of influence at Thinkific and for our customers and their growth. We support entrepreneurs and businesses, which is a passion of mine. And honestly, I'm really passionate about helping women find their way and their voice in leadership. So I'm hoping I can have more impact there this year too. Thank you for having me on this conversation.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. I adore you. And you're already achieving that hope through showing up and sharing your words of wisdom today. So thank you.